Welcome to the KuppingerCole Analyst Chat. I'm your host. My name is Matthias Reinwart. I'm lead advisor and senior analyst at KuppingerCole Analysts. Today I'm joined by two guests, and I'm happy to talk to both of them about an interesting development in the area of cybersecurity. Hi, Alexei Balaganski, and hi, John. So first, hi, Alexei.
Well, hello, Matthias. Thanks for having me again. And hello, John, of course. It would be a really interesting collaboration this time.
Right. Hi, John.
Hello. Nice to be on here with you both.
Great to have you both, and I think you both had also some kind of discussion about that topic recently, so we want to convey and transfer this discussion over to this podcast episode. So it's really a current topic. We want to talk about a lot of acronyms today, 4-letter acronyms, 3-letter acronyms, but the main topic is XDR. So to start out with a definition, maybe you, John, what is XDR? What is the market segment here?
You know, it's interesting. XDR is something that a lot of security vendors are talking about these days. And you'll find that the security vendors, from the EDR and NDR side, which I'll define it all here in a second, are kind of jumping on this bandwagon. So XDR, the X stands for extended detection and response. We see detection and response for endpoints, that's EDR, network detection and response. There's also a managed detection and response if, a third-party service is running some of those tools on behalf of customers. So there's lots of, DR kinds of services and products that are out there. I think what makes XDR different is we've all become accustomed to EDR in the marketplace and the need for that to look for signs of compromise that may have been missed by other security tools. So it's a tool that allows you to do investigations and threat hunting and things like that within your environment. NDR, network detection and response, is being able to detect threats and respond to them that show up on the network that may pass. You may not see that with your EDR tools. So these typically plug into network span or tap ports on routers and switches and things like that. And many of them have a cloud component too. So they have images that you can run in the infrastructure as a service providers to be able to collect telemetry from various cloud instances. So kind of rolling it all together, XDR we think of as something that should catch all of that. It should have a cloud component, an endpoint component, and a network component. And then it also needs to be fed by identity information, whether that's user behavioral analysis and identity governance and administration kinds of tools, audits, access reconciliations, that sort of thing.
Okay, great. So understood. I think that it's really a collection of many technologies combined under one umbrella. But why do we have XDR right now? Why are we moving towards that? And what is the history behind that, Alexei?
That's a really, I would say it's a much more important question than define what XDR is. It's why and how is it different from the tools we already have? Because if you look at it kind of from a layman's perspective, it's not really that much different from a quote-unquote traditional SIEM, or Security Information Event Management solution, right? Because all it does is basically collecting security-related stuff from everywhere in your IT infrastructure and then deciding what to do with it. And I really remember one person telling me that he believed that an XDR tool is basically a SIEM without data lake. And although it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, it actually makes a lot of sense in the hindsight. Because we have SIEM tools for probably close to 30 years now. In the first SIEM platforms, we basically glorified log management solutions with a rules engine, where you can configure what string to look for and kind of alert people that something bad has happened if you detect something in the log. It kept evolving over years. We then had big data, so you could store lots of logs and lots of other telemetry from different sources. You could dig through it in almost real time. You could probably apply some machine learning to correlate the data across different sources. But in the end, a SIEM is basically a tool to help you know what's going on around your company, or configure some rules and triggers and alerts to detect if something bad is happening, right? In a way, XDR does exactly the same. So what is the difference? And I would argue that XDR is a typical case of this convergent evolution. It has evolved from a totally different roots, as John just described. It all started with those real-time endpoint detection systems, detection and response, and then probably incorporated the network detection and response. But in my opinion, the biggest difference is that an XDR solution is, first of all, distributed. So you do not need to keep a huge central database of everything that's going on. It's heterogeneous, so it can reach different types of systems, different types of infrastructure. And of course, it's real time, meaning that you don't actually need to keep a year's worth of history of your security telemetry. You can ingest everything in real time, analyze it in real time, and deliver some insights or even mitigation actions in real time. That's the biggest difference.
Okay, anything to add or to contradict, John?
Well, I would just say, let's not forget the R part of XDR. SIMs in many ways seem pretty passive. So I think it's good to compare it to SIM or first generation SIM, but like SOAR products or add-ons for SIMs, XDR, NDR, EDR, the R all means response. So being able to act on the information, hopefully autonomously, and take those actions as warranted, and not have to wait in many cases for a human analyst interaction. Some of the basic things like being able to go out and grab all the related forensic evidence, do the correlation, assemble that into a ticket, make it easy for an analyst to come in and see what's going on, and then if need be, take additional actions on that. And those actions can range from isolating a host off the network to maybe automatically deleting malicious files on endpoints, automatically deleting phishing emails all around an organization, so that users aren't tempted to open them. Those are the kinds of advantages that I think that the XDR and then the foregoing EDR and NDR kinds of products can handle.
Right, so they really solve real life problems as of now that are occurring right now. So the promise of these products, of this XDR, is keeping an organization safer, more secure by actively detecting and responding to these threats. Is this the reason why the industry is catching up on that acronym, on that technology? It's really promoting that. Is that the reason for that, or is there more behind that? Why is the industry moving towards XDR? I don't know who wants to answer. Alexei, you first?
Yes. Well, first of all, I have to say yes, absolutely. I agree with everything John just said about SIEMs and SOARs. So yes, one would argue that a SIEM without any kind of security orchestration and automation capabilities is a passive and in the end rather useless thing, or because you would end up doing a lot of manual research and manual mitigation. And yes, SOAR solutions have been specifically designed to fill this gap. And XDR is in a way basically kind of aiming to replace this combination of SIEM and SOAR. The problem is that they aren't actually, as you just said, the industry is pushing this acronym pretty strongly at the moment. They offer just about the same set of capabilities as, again, a modern next generation SIEM combined with a SOAR solution. So I guess this is why not many customers have actually expressed interest in even learning about XDR solutions, to say nothing about actually deploying them or replacing the existing SIEMs and SOCs with an XDR tool, right? Because it's a totally new technology. It's based on a different underlying stack of software, but it promises to deliver the same capabilities. So I would ask, why why would I replace maybe a slightly outdated but perfectly working solution with a new one which does the same? Maybe I am missing something. What's your opinion, John?
I would say this is almost entirely vendor driven by their marketing organizations at this point. I mean, I think that there are real use cases that this will solve, but I think it's a bit premature in some cases. I mean, you have vendors on the EDR side that say, we can listen to everything that goes by on the network. You really don't need a network detection and response solution. But I really don't think that's true, because not every device in an organization can necessarily run an endpoint agent. So there's going to be things happening on different kinds of networks that would not be seen by EDR agents. And I think probably the two biggest examples of that are, what we call OT, operational technology, industrial controls, SCADA, uh, industrial IoT. Those kinds of environments don't necessarily run desktops, laptops that can have agents installed on them to watch telemetry that goes by. So, in that case, it's very advantageous to have a network layer sensing capability, whether you plug that into a switch or plug it in inline, to be able to collect that information. And then the other is medical environments. There are lots of medical devices that too, even if they run on standard operating systems like Windows, they may be unable to install additional security software, so they can't have EDR agents either. And there have been cases that we've read about where medical devices get infected with malware, and obviously that's a horrible situation we want to prevent. So, especially in OT and healthcare environments, I think it's important to be able to have network layer detection in addition to endpoint. So, I see synthesizing the two, endpoint and network. And by network, we do include cloud too. So many organizations are hybrid. So you need a way to get information about what's going on in your various cloud instances and factor that into your overall, risk posture, and be able to take action in all those environments too, shutting down network connections, maybe disabling users in the cloud, however you need to be able to respond to threats in any given environment. I think that's where the value for XDR will come into play.
The way you describe these individual components and also the history where that comes from, that sounds to me like you said heterogeneous, which is the nice word for a zoo of different components put together under this umbrella term of XDR. Are these products, even if they're coined or named XDR, are they comparable? Are they comparable from functionality? And how do they relate each other? Are there overlaps? Are there gaps in some products? How does the market look like?
Well, I guess we have to address this again and again, that the same acronym, the same buzzword can be used in a totally different context by different vendors. It was the same with AI. It was the same with the cloud back then. It was the same with zero trust. XDR, again, kind of different vendors means different things. I personally am really interested in this concept of open XDR, which some companies are pushing. The idea that you do not need to deploy a special agent for each system you want to monitor, but you instead talk to an existing agent from a totally different product. So if you are an XDR vendor, you might have a technology partnership with an EDR vendor, or with a network monitoring solution, or with a cloud service provider, to talk to the APIs, to talk to the existing agents or clients, and collect that real-time telemetry, again, in this heterogeneous and open and flexible way. To me, this is like the only reasonable and future-proof approach. Unfortunately, not many vendors actually implement it. Most basically develop this original EDR approach. They have an agent which can collect something from an endpoint, and then they would continue to add more capabilities into that agent to sniff your network, to watch your cloud traffic, and so on. But it's still the same standalone agent. Whether it's actually sustainable in the future, I'm not sure.
That sounds a lot like SOAR in some ways, having a centralized collection point and action point, to do the orchestration and response amongst many different kinds of downstream security tools. So I think, you've hit upon something really interesting, and that is, as business requirements sort of consolidate into, we need to be able to take in information from all around all of our assets, I won't say network, and figure out what's going on and respond appropriately. There may be additional convergent evolution, as you were saying, between SOAR and XDR. I think they're both going to develop similar kinds of capabilities. We may come to the point where organizations choose between SOAR or XDR, or we also may see these kind of fold into one another.
Well, in a way, I would say that even now, this combination of a reasonably good SIEM tool with a reasonably good SOAR tool is almost equally capable to, again, a reasonably good modern XDR solution in terms of detection, analysis, forensic, and response. There is, however, one more additional business requirement which XDRs are almost completely missing nowadays. It's this whole compliance reporting and audit. Again, a SIEM has this huge advantage. It has this huge data lake, which can keep all your historical data for a year or even more, as long as you have your storage paid for, so to say. And XDR traditionally do not rely on such a data lake. They only work in real time. They do not keep the history of what was happening back then. So it would be really difficult to create a compliance reporting lake. So am I protected? So how am I protected this week? Is it any better than last month? Like, what if I want to monitor my kind of security posture trends over the last year? I can absolutely do it with a SIEM. I cannot do it with an XDR.
That's an interesting point too. The real-time analysis nature of XDR versus storage SIM being operated upon by SOAR. You think about some of the recent security incidents that have happened, and like SolarWinds, that took 7 or 8 months to finally detect. There's real value in being able to go back and look at that. In fact, looking at some of the reports I'm working on in this space, I think it's important to be able to offer customers, if you're a security vendor, offer customers long-term storage, because you want to be able to go back 6 or 9 months, especially when you look at some of the metrics out there about mean time to detect, still 5, 6, 7 months in some cases. So the idea that you can only rely, or you only need to rely on real-time information from agents, I think is not quite accurate. I think there's always going to be a need for looking at data from the past, and it could be a rather large amount of storage that's needed for that. Some of these SIM source solutions will try to make it as efficient as possible by looking at metadata and not saving every packet, but still I think there's a storage element that's going to be needed going forward.
Well, if you remember, we had a very similar situation years ago with EDRs. Just when the first EDR solutions appeared, they would just boldly proclaim the antivirus is dead. You no longer need any signatures or heuristic analysis or whatever quote unquote traditional antivirus things. You just analyze the behavior in real time, and you will be able to detect and mitigate all the challenges. It only took a couple of years to realize it just doesn't work. You cannot cover all the use cases and all the types of attacks with just real-time detection and response. So they had to adapt. They had to incorporate some EPP functionality into those hardcore EDR tools. I believe the same will eventually happen with XDRs as well. So they will evolve towards the SIEM-like capabilities.
Yeah, I think you're right. We've seen that evolution in the market where, just like you said, endpoint protection and EDR are now mostly wrapped together in what we're calling EPDR, endpoint protection, detection, and response. We see acquisitions in the network detection and response area. I think we will continue to see, conglomerations of those functionalities as larger companies acquire some of the smaller ones that have functionality in those areas that they don't, so they can compete more effectively as a security stack vendor. And then I think too, um, not just because I'm working on a report on distributed deception platforms right now, but certainly that has informed me that, if you want to do active detection and response, these distributed deception platforms, I think will roll into XDR in the next 3 to 5 years as well, because it's a good way they're very advanced honeypots. I mean, I know a lot of the vendors don't want to call them honeypots, but because they can simulate not just endpoints or servers, but full active directories and applications, even things on the OT and ICS side. So having a deception environment allows you to detect malicious activity with high fidelity, because anything that's happening in a deception environment, you can more or less be assured that it's malicious as long as you've properly concealed it. So that, I think, would make for very excellent information that feeds into an XDR platform in the future.
Right. So from what I understand, what you described is that the marketing machine for XDI is already running quite smoothly. The products, they are here in a version 1.0, or it's older solutions rebranded to being XDR, but the market has to move, has to evolve. You've described that already. Are there any other areas where XDR should move in the future and where it makes sense? As of now, I understand that I still have to architect a security solution that combines these individual components into what I really need. This is not plug and play and off-the-shelf solution that I can just use. I still have to create my proper solution. So XDR misses at that promise to just protect you. So it's still, having a strong security architecture in place and combining all these products. So where can XDR move to mitigate that problem that I see here? I don't know. Alexei, you start?
Yeah, I think it's actually a great opportunity to mention that blog post John has recently written about the whole topic of XDR, and that interesting kind of Venn-like diagram, which you could probably bring up in the recording of the podcast. You will see that what modern XDR vendors are trying to sell us is just the minimum value product. It's just EDR, NDR, it may be a little bit of SOAR. It doesn't incorporate all those other things which we have to cover as well. The cloud workload protection, the whole kind of part where we proactively scan our infrastructure for vulnerabilities. This is just as important as real-time detection. And of course, we have to think about all those technologies which probably do not completely fit into the XDR picture, but at least very tightly related to those. Like, for example, this whole user behavior analytics. One would argue it's not really an integral part of like EDR, but at least it's related to user activities closely. And of course, you have to incorporate user activities into this whole correlation and real-time monitoring. And of course, you have to think about this whole identity stuff. This is why, for example, the diagram includes identity governance and administration. So there's a lot of stuff which is still completely missing. And when are we expected to see any of those capabilities delivered with the XDR label? It's probably the most important question.
I think there are a couple of vendors that are sort of leading the charge into XDR, and they're doing a good job with some of these early phase requirements. And I would imagine that they will continue to add on functionality like Alexei is recommending, especially pulling in identity information. But there's kind of been this gulf between identity and cybersecurity, and I think that needs to be addressed in general. Because XDR and SOAR both are good places to unify your approach to identity management as well as overall cybersecurity posture, and both need to be considered in any organization's overall risk management system as well.
Okay, so if we look at this market of XDR, and if it is like we described it, so it's still something that we should keep an eye on, and we expect that to evolve rather rapidly over time. I understand, John, that you've written that blog post where we've seen the picture from just right now, and this Venn diagram to show where the individual functionalities can be located within this area. So I think a good starting point would be the blog post. Which other reports, which other research are you working on? You've mentioned the work you are currently working on. What else is there?
So I'm close to finishing the Leadership Compass, our comparative report on distributed deception platforms. I'm also writing an update to network detection and response, NDR. At some point in the near future, I'm going to start a Leadership Compass on endpoint protection, detection and response. And then probably next year, I'll be working on a Leadership Compass or a Market Compass on XDR. I think it will be good to survey vendors about what their current capabilities are and see how that compares. And then also I'll be updating the report on SOAR at some point.
And I'm currently working on the Leadership Compass on, as we call it, intelligent SIEM platforms. Of course, it's like the opposite of XDR, but I think it would be really interesting to compare, to see what kind of capabilities you should expect from XDR tools to deliver to be at least on the same kind of feature parity as the modern SIEM tools.
Right, perfect.
Agreed.
So I would expect that we will cover that topic in that podcast quite closely in the upcoming time, because I think there will be lots of changes, and it's been great to talk to two experts here that can provide two different angles, actually agreeing, but okay. So it's important to see that this is really something that is an evolving market, and to continue monitoring that. So we have a starting point for reading more for the audience. So, and we have given a first insight into a evolving market, not yet mature market, lots of rebranding market. So thank you very much, John and Alexei, for joining me today. Any final recommendations from one of you? What else could the audience look at?
I would say if there is only one big takeaway from our today's discussion, that don't trust the label. XDR isn't XDR tools aren't creating the same. You have to look behind the label. You have to understand what is it exactly that the vendor is delivering, and how difficult would it be to extend it in the future. I believe Open XDR is the way, but maybe it will be called differently when you look at specific product.
And I agree. I think we're in the early days. I think even the definition of XDR will change. I mean, if this convergent evolution takes 3 to 5 years to really happen, then there will probably be other kinds of functionality represented by new acronyms that haven't even been born yet that will get rolled into this. So stick with us. We'll continue to follow this. We'll update, and as definitions and capabilities change, we'll stay on top of it.
Great final words. Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Alexei, for joining me today.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Bye-bye. See you soon.